What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Call the Damn Leads, the show by sales professionals for sales professionals. I'm your host, Drewbie Wilson. With more than 2 decades in sales, I've been through it, seen it, heard about it. Now I'm bringing it to you, my favorite people on the planet, the sales community. Because let's be honest, this is the greatest career there ever is. It doesn't matter what personality you have, what background you come from, you can make a life in sales. And today's guest, someone who is no stranger to that. I'm very, very excited to hear more of his story. He's my new friend, Mr. Rob Giardinelli. What's up, brother?
Drewbie, I am so glad to be here, and I cannot wait to talk, wait and talk and chat with your listeners. So this will be really fun.
I am very excited as well. I know we got connected before today, and I really want to know, man. Bring us your hot and heavy sales story. We got to jump right into it.
All right, so I've got two. So one is more a traditional sales story, and one is more a social sales story because, anyone who's in nonprofits, if you have nonprofit development professionals as an audience, it'll relate with that too. So my craziest sales story was I was in Vegas, so no story ever ends well there. And this was, probably 12 years ago or so. And there was a bet that our most senior salesperson, he was like an executive director, not quite a VP, that was there, made with one of the sales reps, and he lost. And the bet was, and it was like 42 degrees out because it was like January, the loser had to jump in the pool with their clothes on and not go in and get changed for the rest of the night. And the executive director lost, did a cannonball in the pool, did not have a drop of alcohol all night. So he did that completely sober, got out of the pool and was a trooper and stayed, another probably hour or 90 minutes or so. That's my sales conference story. My craziest sales story was I went to an auction once where they were auctioning off a fur coat, and one of the patrons got up onto the stage and took the fur coat off of the model, put it on themselves, stole the microphone from the auctioneer, and commandeered the auction.
Did they buy the fur coat at least?
They wore it the rest of the night, kind of like, if anyone's seen 16 Candles, I don't know how old or not old your audience is. It was kind of like that woman who cut the hair off of the back of Carolyn's head when her hair was in the back of the door. It was kind of like that.
Very awkward, and yet you just run with it because they're like, what do you do? And, I think this is why I love sales because I've been to, a couple hundred conferences at this point in my journey, and there's so many funny memes and conversations and stories we won't tell for the sake of the parties involved, especially the ones in Vegas, you crazy characters. That town is just... Vegas is Vegas, but sales professionals and entrepreneurs in particular, there's one meme that I share where it's like day 2 at every entrepreneurial event, and it's a guy outside in the garbage can with his head just buried. Because, you guys, you get out of your comfort zone, you get away from family, friends, and you go crazy. But what I loved about your story is that it was the executive director. He lost the bet, owned up to it, didn't even need the alcohol, said, you know what, a bet's a bet, I'm a paying man, and I bet that guy has gone on to close tons and tons of business just because he honors his word. And
Absolutely.
That's something I think is so powerful.
Absolutely, and I think he's even sold a company since then. I'm not in touch with him anymore, but, other than, through the online stuff. And I believe he's, been an executive, sold a company, and is on to his next one. So he was quite an effective sales guy for sure.
And so I'd love to know, Rob, tell me more about kind of how did you get into sales to begin with? I know you said you've got, several decades of experience, but what was it that got you into sales to start?
So what got me into sales to start was I actually began my career in the tech industry in the year 2000. So it was a completely different world than it is today. And I'm more of an introvert, and I was a brand manager. So basically I was like a merchandise manager. So I had a series of product lines in the networking space and the wireless space. And I managed the vendor relationships with those. And the folks that called, and I work for a technology distributor, it's now called TD Synnex. It used to be called Tech Data. I did that for about 5 years, and one of the manufacturers, and I was living in Florida at the time, and one of the manufacturers I was working for had an opening in Austin. So I wound up taking that job and moving out to Austin and doing kind of more of a true outside sales role as opposed to before, where I was an internal employee. I was there every day. I did the business plans. I managed P&L. So I understood all the basics of business. So it was really an excellent training ground for me to be a salesperson. And what's interesting about that type of sales, indirect sales is very different from direct sales, because indirect sales requires, I don't want to say it requires more business acumen, but I think it definitely requires a little bit more organization and patience, just because you're not necessarily in control of all the sales, because you're selling to people who are selling to the end customer. So you don't really have as direct of a stake in that, insofar as you can only do so much influencing. Whereas if you're the actual person calling on the account, you know, you have a lot higher level of influence, you know, when you have that luxury and that good fortune.
And what I love about what you kind of mentioned is how you went from, you know, internal employee to being a sales professional. And there's so much nuance to how that can transition. And what I loved was you came in from the service perspective, like, hey, I'm here to service and help and do these things, and then made that transition into sales. And I'm a believer that if you can do well in service, you can do phenomenal in sales, because it's just the way that you build relationships and the way that you lean in, and you just operate a little bit differently because you care about customers. And if you've ever been yelled at by them enough times from a service standpoint, like, you realize you don't want to be in that position again. So Rob, what would you say, you know, over the years, you've kind of made your sales superpower? What's that thing that you do that you think is kind of different than everybody else?
I think people have the misconception that all salespeople are raving extroverts and they're all the life of the party and they, you know, backslap and glad handle everybody. And that's not true. I would say, you know, 70% of CEOs are introverts. So a lot of people who get to really successful places are more introverted. So I think my superpower is that I listen, and extroverts can listen. And it's, you know, it's one of those things, especially if you've got anyone who's more of in an executive role that's listening right now. Don't automatically send your extrovert to that conference, because it depends on the type of conference it is. If it's about glad handling, yes, send your extrovert. But if you want to gain competitive insight and competitive knowledge and what your competitors are doing and get a leg up on some other people, you may want to send an introvert, because they're not going to command the room and crave the attention. And the one thing that I have learned is two things. One, people love to talk about themselves. That's first and foremost. And when you look at them and you ask questions and you listen, it never ceases to amaze me how much people will open up to you, whether they've known you for 5 years or 5 minutes. You know, and I'm in a different life now. I still do, you know, a level of sales, but in the social events and the nonprofit events I go to, it's amazing how pretty high statured people will share stuff with like little old me who's, you know, walking around the room. It's really fascinating what people will share if they're comfortable with you.
Well, and I'm going to share a book that you've probably read it, and it might even be on your shelf behind you there, because you've got some pretty great titles. I can't see them too well, but I know you've got some good ones up there. But The Introvert's Edge.
Yes.
Have you ever read that?
I've heard of it. I read like the foreword of it, but I didn't like read it.
I would recommend, if you like to read, grab it. And anyone who's listening, if you feel as though you've ever tended to be a little more introverted or reserved, there's some power to that. Understand that silence is powerful, and the ability to be an empath and to listen, it puts you in a different atmosphere of ability when it comes to sales and service. And I also I think it's important when I try to send people to events or when I go to events, I'm a little more introverted myself. I can play the extrovert. Don't get me wrong. I've learned to develop that skill set, but at heart, I'm an introvert. I like to do me. I'm kind of a behind the scenes guy. I always try to pair up with an extrovert, though, because you can, if you can find someone that you're close with that knows your style and your vibe, they'll go out and do all the glad handing, and they're going to be the one that's like, oh, I'm just here to shake hands and kiss babies. You got to talk to Drewbie. Like, that's the guy with the answers, and there's a power play that you can use there. So I like to share that, because that's something that I've used effectively, is like pairing up with more of an extroverted person and letting them kind of play that part, and then sitting back and being the more reserved person. And so, Rob, I would love to know, as you transition out of the sales stuff and kind of more into like the nonprofit side and what you're doing now, how did that happen?
So, my now husband runs a luxury lifestyle magazine for the state of Texas. So he not only do we go to events in Austin all the time, but also events in San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, which, we initially connected because you lived in Texas for a period of time.
Yep.
So I had been in sales about a decade at that point, and this was before the infamous pool incident. So it was one of those things when I came home and said it, I for once had the shocking story. So what I realized though, because for about 5 years, and I did national, regional, and global roles. So I would be traveling to God knows where all week, every week. And then I come home, I have to throw on a suit, throw on a tux, throw on a whatever, and go to an event or go to a gala. And the longer I did it, because there's something, when you're going to an event that raises $1 million, there's a lot of really effective sales techniques that you see. There's a lot of really effective relationship building techniques that you see. You see the power of emotion, and I don't care how technical or data driven your product is, there is always going to be a level of emotion in anything that you purchase or buy. But the more of it I was going to those, when I had to go to a business meal, when I was in the tech industry, it got increasingly painful. Like to the point where the last year, if I was in New York for meetings for the day and I knew that there was a dinner after the fact, I purposely stay in Philadelphia or Boston so I wouldn't have to go. Because when you walk into a room and everyone they're on the same page, and you can tell when an organization's on the same page, there's just a lot of power in that. And a lot of people, and I think most salespeople can relate, they'll get invited to a business meal or they'll go to a conference and they have no idea why they're there. They have no idea what their objectives are. They have no idea what their goals are. It just creates this really boring time. And yes, you may get a really nice fancy meal, but there's more to life than a nice fancy meal. There's people in your life that you care about that you probably rather spend your time with. And there's only so many times that you can do those nice $100 steaks before it really kind of gets a little boring. So the longer I did that, the more painful it became. And then after about 5 years of doing that's when I transitioned out of tech sales and navigated into this world full time and really made going to events kind of my career and my passion. And I've gone to over 2,000 now in the last 15 years.
I appreciate you sharing that, because I find that when I'm working with professionals, there's kind of phases that you go through. You start as an employee. You're like, all right, cool, I'm going to go and work and I'm going to sell stuff for someone else, and I only got to show up and do what I do, and I get paid to sing and dance and whatever. And then you might transition up to like a leadership role or kind of stepping into being that entrepreneur, and you progress through the process. And you're right, at a certain point, the $300 steak dinners that you could have went and spent $50 on at your local favorite place where the atmosphere is better and you don't listen to people bragging about how great they are and all the things that they've done. And don't get me wrong, there's a time and a place for that. I understand there's nuance, but what I love about that transition is there's a lot of people right now that are in that spot. Yes. They're miserable where they are, even though they're making, $100, $200, couple $100,000 a year. They've got the benefits or whatever, that comfort. It's strangling them. And it's actually preventing them from stepping into the thing that they're truly going to be the greatest at. And I can see that in you. I can see where you've been like, that passion for what you do now is so much different. And what I love about it is that raising money is not easy. You ever call and ask somebody to donate $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 or to sponsor an event? It is 100% different kind of sales than calling to sell someone a product or service that they actually want. Because you can only tell somebody that it's a tax write-off so many times. Yeah, they know it's a tax write-off. That's why they're making big donations. But what's the emotional connection? What's the relationship there? What is the value to them being a part of this movement? And Rob, I'd love to know how you kind of use that transition and maybe can offer some advice for someone who's trying to go through that. Like, I want to get out of the thing I'm stuck in and go all in on the thing that I want to be doing.
One, you have to acknowledge, like you said, you have to acknowledge that it's scary because you're giving up something that's comfortable. You're kind of giving up, I don't want to say something that people envy, but a lot of people don't have. People are always envious of what they don't have. So for a lot of people, the grass is always greener on the other side. So there's that level of envy there. So just acknowledge that it's going to be scary as you transition out of it. Second, for me, what I realize, and, I've transitioned to now where I'm, doing consulting and coaching, is what makes you uniquely you. I know that there is not anyone who did sales for 15 years and then goes and writes about nonprofit events. I don't really have people that I can pick up the phone and be like, hey, how did you navigate this transition? You know, I hope someone else calls me someday asking for that advice, because I'd be really glad to give it. Find what's uniquely you. When you find what's uniquely you, more opportunities are going to open themselves up. But you have to be brave enough and you have to be courageous enough to be like, okay, I have this one thing that nobody else has. And when you have something nobody else has, that's scary too, because you don't know how the market's going to react to it. You may wonder, am I 5 years ahead of my time? The more that you do it, the more doors are going to get knocked down. And that's always, you know, with me is the more I do it, the more I explain. And people are like, you know what? That's absolutely the case. I'm sick and tired of going to X, Y, or Z. And one of the reasons I started this was coming right out of COVID. I mean, I can't tell you how many executives told me, I had one tell me that they would pay to not go to stuff if they could. And I was like, okay, is it really that bad now? Because, you know, I haven't gone to a tech business dinner in 9 or 10 years now, but it is. So, you know, you want to make sure that you just embrace your, you know, what makes you uniquely you, and don't be afraid of it. Be unapologetic about it. Know that what you're going to do is probably going to alienate some other people, and that's perfectly okay. What I have learned about events, and, you know, having gone to a lot of them, is for every one I'm invited to, there's probably 10 I'm not invited to, but I'm not going to get jealous because I've got plenty of things that I can go to. So don't be jealous of what you don't have. Focus on the incoming of what you do have, because there's actually a lot of opportunity coming to you if you show up, and you act like you want to be there. And those are really the two things of wherever you show up, whether it's a sales call or a social event, you have to act like you want to be there.
That's powerful. I forget what the phrase is. I've been butchering quotes all day today, Rob, so forgive me. But it's like emotion creates motion, right? And so if you go to an event with a sour attitude, I promise you everybody there that's trying to connect with people is going to look at you and go, I'm not in the mood for sour grapes today. I'm going to move on to the next person. I would love your perspective, you know, because you have such an immense value to knowledge of events and being successful in them. And you know, I know you have a consulting practice that you probably coach some of this stuff on. But like, if you could give the listener maybe one or two really powerful things that they should focus on at every event that they go to, what would you say those might be?
Set goals, do research.
Set goals, do research. Can you expand on that a little bit?
So when you set goals, I always say that goals there's 3 types of goals. There is confidence goals, there are purpose goals, and there are joy goals. And whether it's business or personal, I've never known a successful salesperson who didn't in some way bring some personal in. So you need all 3 of those things. So if you're going to an office Christmas party and they have, so I'll give you a good example. When I was in the tech industry, I managed a company called Nortel Networks, and they were a big dominant networking player until like the late 2000s, and they went under. But every year we did these cookie tins that were chocolate covered Oreos, and people would go crazy for them when we would have them at an event. So if you arrived early and on time, you would get one of those cookies. If you showed up late and you weren't paying attention, that can be a goal. That goal is going to make you really happy because you're going to get to have this wonderful, you know, this wonderful thing to eat. So it's not just about business. So the people I work with, I always advise in the beginning, do 3 goals and do 1 in each lane, because you want to create a level of happiness for being there and something to genuinely look forward to, especially if events are painful. That's a way to find something that you can look forward to. If you got, you know, an invitation that said that the signature cocktail is going to be your favorite whiskey, get there on time so you can get that signature cocktail so that you have it in hand, and that will make you feel more comfortable. So joy is really, you know, joy is any one of those things. Confidence is doing something that's outside of what you would normally do, or something you haven't done before, or something you failed at before. And then purpose is getting a contact, getting information, getting those things so that you can come out of that event thinking that it was worthwhile for you to attend. So those are really kind of the 3, you know, the 3 lanes that you would want to do and work with where that's concerned.
Those are great. And I don't know if you noticed, I've been taking notes over here, Rob, because I'm a continual student, right? I love to learn every single day. I'm like, I'm going to take a little of this. I'm going to take a little of this. Ooh, that's good. I like that. And so it's no surprise to me that with all your experience and all the knowledge that you've poured into us today, that you got into consulting and helping others on this path. So would you mind telling us a little bit about like specifically who you work with, kind of how you help get them dialed in?
So I work with really all client-facing professionals. And the reason for that is, because I know that a lot of consultants, they'll do a really specific niche. With
Sure.
what I do, the problem is that if I only worked with one type of person, I wouldn't be paying attention to all the different dynamics that are out there. Because the thing is with events, you're dealing with human beings. So you may be a salesperson, and you may be because someone got sick. And I think all of us have been sent to something at the last minute where they got sick, and it's a marketing conference. And let's say you get stuck in a marketing analyst meeting, which may be a bunch of introverts, and you're an extrovert. You want to make sure that you're around as wide a range of people as possible. So really what I do with client-facing professionals is we work on various conversation topics, things that they feel most comfortable with, and we lean into those things so that they feel comfortable talking to anybody. And that's, what I do on an individual level. And really, I would say it's from mid-career, to executive that I work with. And then I work with organizations because they want to optimize their teams better. They're tired of hosting bad business meals. They're tired of conferences feeling like they're a waste of time, they're a waste of money, they're a waste of resources. Because, companies put a lot of resources. When they go to a conference, like if you're in the tech industry and go to CES, you're spending hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars there, that you want to really make sure that you're optimizing those events and you're treating everyone on your team with the unique special gifts that they have. Because the thing is, and I'm a believer, treat everyone with kindness, treat everyone with dignity, but how you go about that, people are going to respond to different things. And as the good organizations and the ones I work with know, I want to send certain types of individuals to certain types of events because it's going to give ROI and it's going to allow that employee to grow. And when you can do those two things, you wind up with a better company culture and you wind up with more morale because everyone's seen as having different skill sets and not the traditional, they get to go to this event all the time. That's really cool because they're the most boisterous person on the team. The really good organizations realize that there's a place for that, but there's a place for other people at the table too.
Yeah, that's so true. And what I really think is so interesting, having been on both sides, right? I've gone to hundreds of events the last few years. I was a part of a company that hosted hundreds of events. And what I will tell you with 100% certainty is whether you are a guest or the host of an event, there are systems, there are processes, there are things that you can follow to make it a little bit easier on yourself. I promise event day will always test you, whether you're a guest or a host. There will be a million different things that come up and throw you for a loop. But I know working with professionals, having some folks in your corner that have gone down that path, who have done those things, it'll save you a ton of money. Because I've watched people walk in and sign checks for $100,000 for AV equipment, not realizing they spent $10,000 for an AV router to get Wi-Fi that didn't work all day, and I've been there where people have paid $5,000 to be a backstage member and realize that the backstage is actually in front of the door to the backstage where they get to see people walking by with their security, so working with a professional, Rob, I know this is where you can really dive in and help people, whether they're the guest or the host and setting things up for success. So what's the best way for someone to come and find you and learn more about what you guys do?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. And I do want to say one thing before that. And that is that I have separate host and guest curriculums just because what's expected of either, and I'm glad you brought that up, are very, very different things. And I would say 75% of the people I work with, they go through the guests first. I kind of make them, unless if you've come and you've chaired $1 million event, I know that we may be able to bypass that. So, I wanted to make sure to highlight that. But people can find me at eventmindset.com. They can download a free cheat sheet there. It's called 6 Ways to Gracefully Exit Any Conversation. So there's ways to do that nicely and politely. It's more of a high level one. It's people that I work with more specifically and more closely will get into more tactical things about exchanging information and all that. But it's really just about exiting a conversation when you feel that it's run its course, so that you know that when you're at something, don't find that one person, find lots of people. You don't need to grab onto one person as a crutch. That's how you build confidence, and how, me as an introvert, I know now I want to talk to 10 people if I'm at a cocktail reception for an hour. I don't want to talk to one. And that's, a really important thing with growth. And with that comes more opportunity, because you're going to talk to 10 times the number of people. That can come with that 10 times the number of leads.
Well, and you know what? I will agree that I think the ability to exit a conversation gracefully is important on both sides, right? You should be a great guest, and you should know how to exit a conversation, like reading body language and seeing this person's trying to move on and you don't want to be rude. Like, there's so much nuance to that. And as a host, wanting to talk to as many people as possible without them feeling brushed off or thinking that you're a jerk because you only said hi to them, but they don't understand that event day is crazy. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of nuance to that. So I think a cheat sheet on how to exit a conversation is fantastic. I, for one, will be going to grab it. Remind me where I can check that out.
Eventmindset.com.
Eventmindset.com. Rob, thank you so much for being here with us, man. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to chat with you, getting to learn more about what you guys do. And again, I know I'm going to be headed over to check you guys out there.
I appreciate it, Drewbie. This was a lot of fun.
You got it. Well, hey, if you guys enjoyed this, make sure you go follow Rob. Check out eventmindset.com. Get that download because it's going to be a good one, I'm sure. And subscribe. Share the show. Tell a friend about it, right? If you got some value today, make sure someone else gets to enjoy and appreciate it as much as I did. And more than anything, if you have a crazy sales story, you want to share it on the show, callthedamnleads.com/podcast. Send us your info. I'd love to share it. Just like my friend Rob today, there's so many amazing things that we can learn through the stories of others and through the amazing things that sales can bring us. So make sure you guys go call the damn leads. We'll see you on the next one.